Flower Hill. We are happy to have you come in this particular year, but try to realize that we want you to know the place as it was when it was built in 1877. Then you would not have heard all of this noise from the street because Austin stopped at Shoal Creek and what is now West 6th Street was only a dusty country road. My grandfather, Dr. Richmond Kelly Smoot, chose to come out into the country to build his home, and he wanted a place on the hill, which this is. He also liked the little lake, which was over to my right. You can't see it now because it disappeared many years ago. That's quite another story. But where Pressler Street now is used to be a lake. Here on the front porch, you can see evidence of all sorts of unusual things about building then opposed to now. The house was built of brick, handmade brick, made on the other side of the Colorado River, right down here a short distance away, over in what is now Zilker Park, about where Stratford Drive comes to the river. Also, notice that the brick were handmade to the extent of even being measured for the particular place where they are. The brick here in the bay windows were all measured to fit the angle, that 3/4 angle, which is needed for all of the walls of the bay windows. Likewise, over to my right behind me, the wall of the library, as you will see it is, was made of brick so fresh and so new they were still soft. So when they were picked up, many fingerprints are shown in those brick. You can't see them from this angle, but take your time later and go to see those handmade brick. Also, these columns were not here on the original house. The house in the beginning had a simple frame porch with simple posts, simple wooden posts. But in 1925, after that many years, the house needed some repairs, and so my mother decided it would look better with columns, regular pillars. My father wasn't quite so sure we needed columns, but there was a house available down south of where Covert Buick now is, and he said that he would try to get those columns. He made an arrangement with the people who owned the place to sell him the columns when he was ready to put them onto this remodeled front porch. However, in the meantime, Dr. Z.T. Scott came to town, like the entire old house down there, which was decaying rapidly. He bought the entire house, and the owners let the pillars go with the house, forgetting all about their arrangement with my father. My mother was greatly distressed over losing those pillars, but my father said, well, such things did happen sometimes. Those are the pillars that are now on Sweetbrush, which became the Z.T. Scott home out on the lake. But about these columns, my mother was so determined to have columns that she and the contractor went up the river and on a private property persuaded the man to sell them 6 large, tall, thick cypress trees. So they cut those, brought them in, had already dug great holes for them, put those 6 trees, cypress trees, down into the holes, poured concrete around, bricked around that, and then bricked around all the trees, and used plaster and whitewash and paint later to make what we call Mother's columns. They're not Corinthian and they're not Ionic or any of the other classical kinds, but architects have said these are strong, that they will probably outlast the kind that have to be cared for so carefully. By the way, before we go inside, something else occurs to me, and that is how the place got its name of Flower Hill. My grandfather, coming here from Kentucky, was very much taken with pecans, and he wanted pecans on the place. But for some strange reason, they would not grow for him. And my grandmother, on the other hand, was planting flowers right and left and had wonderful luck with those. They all bloomed, they all grew, they all multiplied everywhere. So grandmother teased grandfather by saying, "You want to call it Pecan Place, but you have no pecans. But I have flowers, so I think we should call it Flower Hill." And therefore it got its name. And as we turned to go in the door, one more thing I noticed. Above the door, we have this Texas star in iron, wrought iron, by Mr. Lee Weigel, W-E-I-G-L, one of the superb craftsmen that came to Austin. His father did, that is, bringing the family. Anyway, the Weigel Iron Works has been famous and much treasured in Austin for a long time. This house originally did not have ironwork around the windows or even fences, but situations and times changed to the point we needed so much more protection that we finally had to put the fences around, and all of the windows are barricaded, the doors are barricaded with wrought iron, and above the front door Mr. Weigel created this really superb Texas star. So that is Mr. Weigel's star. Now come on into Flower Hill. At this point, the original greenhouse was built. It was much smaller than this structure. It would actually have fit inside this structure, I think. But it was very limited in size. So my mother and father decided in the early 1920s to enlarge it. And they did by building this brick wall around it, and then on top of the brick wall they had a superstructure of windows and open roof, all with glass. You can still see the iron pieces sticking up around the wall which anchored that wooden structure onto the wall space. And it was a very nice greenhouse, but a very cold winter came along, and they were so afraid the freezes would destroy all the plants inside, they put a kerosene stove in to keep things above freezing. They didn't know that the man who sold the kerosene had watered it, and somehow the kerosene exploded and caught fire. They had several bales of peat moss in here. When peat starts burning, it never knows when to quit. So we had quite a fancy fire on hand. When that was taken away, all the superstructure that was burned, they decided not to replace the greenhouse, but turn it into an arbor, such as you see here. And again, my father called on Mr. Weigel to design this creation of iron, which you see. I must tell you that Mr. Weigel urged that we not paint this iron. He wanted it kept just as natural iron and to let it oxidize as it would. I was trying so hard to make it look clean and neat that I insisted on painting, and I've been sorry ever since because the iron just eats away the paint. It does not hold, and it's impossible to keep on painting it. I tried and wasted, I think, a lot of money trying to keep this painted. And I've given up at this point, but Mr. Weigel's iron still shows, and it's a nice place of shade in the hot summertime. In this bed, right outside the east side of the house, you can see these unusual stones which make a kind of double cruciform in the bed. These stones were the paving blocks in the sidewalk of Austin on Congress Avenue between 6th and 7th Street. Not all of them. You see, my great uncle that we've referred to before, Lawrence Alexander Graham, had a dry goods store called Graham and Company. This store was located just about where the north half of One American Center now is. The sidewalk in front of his store was paved with these very stones you see here. When the city decided to repave the sidewalk, they wanted to get rid of everything old. So out came all the old paving stones and were given to anybody that wanted them. So my great uncle had them brought home here, and sorry, they were put here as stepping stones. Some of these same stones, same kind, are at the back of the Neil Cochran home. The same ones exactly. Here you see the superstructure of the cistern, and here the pipes coming down from the roof which bring the water to this box which contains charcoal. The charcoal purifies and it goes on in. We had other purifying measures as well, but the rainwater in those days was mostly pure. It was not contaminated the way it may sometimes be today. The cistern itself is as large as a regular room underneath the place we are standing. And every year in the early fall we had to put down ladders. We took away all of this superstructure, put down ladders, first pumped out the water and then sent men down with great brushes to clean the cistern. And then we'd get ready for the first rains in the fall and filled it, kept it full, and used the water from it. There on the back porch you see one of the buckets hanging where we kept the water always available for drinking and other purposes too. We did not have the free-flowing water then that we have now. This cistern actually helped even as late as in the 1940s, when there was a terrific flood on the Colorado River, which cut off the water supply here in this part of town. And people from this area came here to get water from this cistern, even as they went to the wells on the Capitol grounds. When we were a large family, meaning a permanent family with all of the young people staying here, each person had a duty to perform inside the house and outside the house. The duties were never burdensome. They were always brief and simple, but with that many people and everybody doing his job, everything was taken care of. So here out in the open, out in the yard, we also had different parts assigned to be done. This place where we're now looking, where the stones are, where the sidewalk stones are, that was my place, and it was planted mostly then in violets, and my job was to keep the violets picked all the time so they would keep blooming. And I think that's the reason I have stiff knees today, because I sat on my heels so long picking violets. Down there under the great live oak tree was the area my aunt took care of, my mother's oldest sister, Amelia Williams, who lived with us from 1925 until her death in 58. She had all of the space from the large live oak tree down to that hedge of nandinas, which shows bright green in the distance. She had beautiful flowers there. Under the tree, she had honeycomb rock arranged in the shape of a large J, a printed J, the letter J. She did that for my mother, whose first name was Julia, and sister, my aunt, planted that rockery, which it is, in all kinds of bulbs and perennials so that it was constantly blooming. It helped to substantiate the name of the place as Flower Hill. Columbines were her favorite, and she had beautiful, beautiful columbines of many colors. So all of us did our job, and all of us helped Flower Hill to grow. Thanks for coming.